This is my last Erik Larson review, at least for a little bit, I promise. Sorry, I have to hold this one up because this one is about Yahtzee, Germany, and so there are some unfortunate things on the cover, so I'm not going to be showing it anymore. However, I want to talk about this book because this is my second favorite Erik Larson book that I have read to date. Dead Wake still takes the cake for me. However, this one was also extremely well done. In the Garden of the Beast is the title of this one, and this one reads more like a novel than other nonfiction books, probably even more so than Dead Wake, to be perfectly honest with you. This one is much more narrative than Dead Wake is, and I think I just like Dead Wake more because I learned more from it. I think a lot of us know a lot about the World War II era, and so this one was not quite as enlightening as the other one was, but I still really liked it. What makes this book so amazing is that Larson is able to focus on how terrifying and yet glamorous the rise of Hitler was in like the early 1930s, and how despite everyone knowing he was a threat, no one really recognizing that he would remain a threat for long. Basically, everyone was justifying that everyone knew he was crazy, so he was going to be booted. And so obviously that never happens. Hindsight is 2020. But this book explores the relationship between the U.S. ambassador to Germany, William Dodd, and his daughter Martha, to the rest of Germany, particularly people in power, SS officers, other Germans that they're meeting along the way, and kind of what they experience and the things that they have to navigate while they're living in the rise of Yahtzee, Germany. I found this book to be extremely interesting because Martha in particular is an extremely interesting human being. I can't say character because she was a real person. She is, for lack of a better word, bold. She's fascinating. I don't know how else to describe her. She's a very bold person. She's extremely curious, and sometimes she's also extremely reckless. She's really drawn in to the like ideologies of Yahtzee, Germany, but not because of like she truly believes in the politics of it, but because she's like intrigued by the opulence of it to a certain degree. So she's extremely compelling in that way, but also like extremely unsettling in that way because like you and I know what becomes of Germany and the people who choose to defy it and everything's or support it, so she's not always likable because of stuff like that. Sometimes I'm like, oh girl, what the hell. But she was like in her early 20s, and so she was kind of experiencing it in a time where like no one knew what was going to be happening in the near future, and so I think that Larson does a really good job of using Martha as an example of someone who, or like how someone can get so easily swept up into something that is not only dangerous, but like the consequences of the actions are like not truly felt until something serious happens. Like they might be aware that it's dangerous moving forward and everything. Like Martha is under no disillusionment about like how serious the situation in Germany is, but she's under the illusion that like she is safe, therefore other Americans are safe, and therefore she doesn't care too much kind of degree. And as things get more serious and as people, Americans and otherwise, start to be harmed, she starts to care more because she's seeing it more. And so I think part of Martha's struggle was just hearing things versus seeing them was a very different experience for her. And so, like I said, she's a complicated person, but at some point she is fully taken aback by all of the events, and she refuses to participate any longer. And she becomes actually a spy for the Soviet Union and, fully tries to take away as much information as she can to create the downfall of the German state. And so I found Martha to be extremely interesting. Dodd himself, the actual ambassador, less so, but he is interesting in the sense of he kind of saw what was coming. He was trying to raise the alarm as soon as he could about everything that was happening, as soon as he got back to the United States after serving for a year in Germany. and no one really decided to take him super seriously. He told everyone that he thought there was going to be a war within the next like year or whatever it was, or within the next couple years, and everyone kind of just laughed him off. But he didn't let that stop him from trying to continue to raise the alarm. And so he was interesting in that sense, but like I said, Martha was the more intriguing character just because I find her fascinating. I think she's like a deeply flawed person, but in a sense of she kind of explains, I think, well, what happened and how people got so caught up in the fervor of what was going on in Germany at the time, before they truly found out how deeply screwed they were after they allowed all of these things to happen. So that was super interesting about this book, or that was something that was super interesting about this book. But what really stuck with me was how familiar a lot of this felt, which is deeply concerning. A lot of people really downplayed the threat of Germany at the time, not just Germans, but also everyone else around the world. They made excuses. They hoped that it was not a long-term problem, and they just kind of thought it would all blow over. And it's really hard not to see parallels to what's happening right now. And I find that to be scary, but also enlightening. And so I just want to end with recognizing that like it is a quiet kind of horror to see history repeating itself, and that there are moments when people don't take it seriously. And so I want all of you to remember that like what's happening right now is serious, to use your voice to stand up for people that don't have a voice or can't use their voice, and to read books like this because you know, it's really good to stay informed and remind yourself how things start. So if you're into history that feels urgent, this one, I'm not gonna hold it up again, sorry, actually, because of the cover. But if you're into history that feels urgent, this is definitely worth the read. I would pick this one up for sure.